A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine waking up to 1,000 notifications, not from a viral tweet or a funny meme, but from people you have never met describing the color of your front door, your social security number, and the name of the kindergarten your kid attends. That visceral cold sweat moment is the reality of being doxxed, and honestly, the threshold for that happening to a regular person has never been lower than it is right now in early 26.
It is a terrifying prospect, Corn. And what makes it more pressing today is that the labor cost of ruining someone's life has plummeted. We used to think of doxers as these basement-dwelling specialists spending weeks sifting through obscure forums, but today's prompt from Daniel really highlights how that's changed. He's asking about the mechanics, the legality, and specifically how cyberbullies are now leveraging AI to piece together these digital puzzles. By the way, a quick shout out to our script writing assistant today, Google Gemini 3 Flash, which is helping us structure these deep dives.
I'm glad we're tackling this because there's a lot of internet tough guy talk about doxing, but the actual real-world consequences are devastating. You have people losing jobs, being swatted, or facing physical stalking. But before we get into the heavy stuff, Herman Poppleberry, let's get specific. Everyone says they know what doxing is, but from a technical and legal standpoint, where do we draw the line? Is it just Googling someone, or is there a specific threshold where it becomes a dox?
That is the crucial distinction to start with. Most people think if information is public record, then sharing it cannot be doxing. That is a massive misconception. Doxing is the malicious aggregation and public dissemination of private or identifying data. The keyword there is aggregation. You might have your name on a property tax website, your face on a LinkedIn profile, and your political rants on an anonymous Reddit account. Individually, those are just data points. Doxing is the act of connecting those dots to strip away the shield of anonymity and then broadcasting that packet to an audience with the intent to harm, humiliate, or incite harassment.
So, it's the difference between a journalist looking up a CEO's office address and a mob posting a private home address with a go-get-'em caption. But who is actually doing this? Is it just bored teenagers on image boards, or are we looking at a more sophisticated class of bad actors?
It's a spectrum. On one end, you have the classic hacktivists, or ideological vigilantes. They feel they are doing God's work by unmasking someone they perceive as a villain. But we've seen a massive rise in what I call the gray zone of vigilante journalists and even state-sponsored actors. If a foreign intelligence service wants to silence a dissident, they don't always need to arrest them, they just need to leak their home address to local extremists. Then you have the swatters, the absolute bottom of the barrel, who use dox info to trick police into raiding a target's home. We saw a horrific case just last year, the 2025 streamer swatting ring. These guys weren't even elite hackers. They were just using leaked database lookups from old telecommunications breaches to find the physical addresses tied to IP addresses.
That streamer swatting case was a wake-up call because it showed how a tiny bit of leaked data from years ago acts like a skeleton key today. But let's talk about the law. If I'm a victim, can I actually call the cops and expect a result? Or is the legal system still playing catch-up with a dial-up mindset?
It is a patchwork, and honestly, it's frustrating. In the United States, there isn't a single clean federal anti-doxing act that covers everything. Instead, prosecutors have to stitch together laws against stalking, harassment, or interstate threats. However, some states are leading the way. California's anti-doxing statute is a significant benchmark because it focuses on the intent to place a person in reasonable fear. But even then, prosecution is a nightmare.
Why is that? Is it just the anonymity of the attacker, or something deeper?
It's the public records defense. An attacker will argue in court, I just posted a screenshot of a public website, how is that a crime? To beat that, the prosecution has to prove malicious intent and a direct link to the resulting harm. This is where the FTC settlement with PeopleConnect in 2024 becomes so important. PeopleConnect, which operates sites like TruthFinder and Instant Checkmate, was essentially acting as a bridge for doxers. The FTC started cracking down on how these data brokers aggregate information without consent, signaling that the "it was already public" excuse is losing its legal teeth.
It's like saying I didn't build the bomb, I just gathered the gunpowder, the fuse, and the casing from different stores and left them on your porch with a lighter. The intent is pretty clear. But Herman, you mentioned earlier that the labor cost is dropping. Daniel's prompt specifically asked about AI. How are cyberbullies using LLMs to make this easier? Because I assume an AI isn't just going to give me someone's address if I ask for it.
You're right, the safety rails on most commercial AI will block a direct request like find the home address of this Twitter user, but doxers are smarter than that. They use AI for semantic mimicry and stylometry. Think about how you write, corn. You have certain quirks, specific typos, or a penchant for obscure sloth facts. If you post on Reddit as user A and on a private forum as user B, an LLM can analyze the syntax, the vocabulary, and the sentence structure to determine with high statistical probability that both accounts belong to the same person.
Wait, so my writing fingerprint is a liability? I can't even hide behind a pseudonym if my grammar gives me away.
Well, not exactly, but that is the mechanism. It's called stylometric clustering. In January of this year, the OSIteen Framework 3.0 was released, and it integrated automated LLM correlation features. It can ingest thousands of posts from different platforms and flag accounts that sound like the same human. It also cross-references timestamps. If user A always stops posting at 11 p.m. Jerusalem time and user B starts at 11:05, the AI identifies that temporal overlap. It's connecting the dots on steroids.
That is terrifying. It's taking the manual labor out of stalking. It used to take a dedicated hater weeks to find that kind of overlap. Now, a script can do it in seconds across the entire indexed web. It makes me think about what we've called the radical transparency paradox before. We're told to be our authentic selves online to build a brand or community, but every authentic detail is just more fuel for the AI doxing engine.
It really is a paradox. The more human you are online, the more data points you leave for a machine to identify you. We've seen high-profile cases where people were unmasked just because they mentioned a specific local weather event or a niche restaurant opening at the same time on two different accounts. With AI, you don't even need the person to be famous. You could run these tools against anyone who annoys you in a comment section.
Okay, so the offense has these automated super tools now. Let's pivot to the defense. Daniel asked for common sense InfoSec guidelines for the anonymous crowd. If I want to post my spicy takes without my boss or some random troll showing up at my door, what is the modern starting kit for staying hidden?
The first thing to accept is that a VPN is not a magic invisibility cloak. It hides your IP address from the site you're visiting, which is good, but it does nothing against browser fingerprinting or the semantic leaks we just discussed. Step 1 is compartmentalization. You need to treat your online personas like separate biological labs. Use a dedicated browser profile for your anonymous activity, something like LibreWolf or a hardened Firefox that has all tracking and fingerprinting protections cranked to the max.
And I assume you shouldn't be using the same email address for your burner account and your Netflix subscription.
Absolutely not. You should be using masked emails. Services like Firefox Relay or SimpleLogin allow you to create a unique email for every single site. If one site gets breached and your email user1@gmail leaks, a doxer can just search that email on every other platform to find your other accounts. If every account has a unique random alias, that trail goes cold immediately.
What about the writing fingerprint? If I'm worried about an LLM identifying my style, do I have to start writing like a robot?
It's called semantic hygiene. It sounds exhausting, but for high-stakes anonymity, it's necessary. You can actually use an AI defensively here. Take your post, run it through a prompt that says rewrite this in a neutral, professional tone and remove any regional slang or unique idioms, and then post the output. You're using the AI to launder your writing style.
I love the irony of using an AI to protect yourself from an AI. It's like wearing a digital mask. But what about the physical stuff? I remember we talked about the sky is a snitch a while back, how people get doxxed by the reflection in their sunglasses or the shape of the clouds in a photo.
That is still a huge risk. Geolocation via OSINT has become a sport for some people. There's a famous case where a streamer was doxxed because a fan recognized the specific chirp of a bird in the background that only lived in a certain part of Virginia. Common sense rule, never post photos of the view from your window. Even a boring skyline can be triangulated using Google Earth and AI-assisted terrain matching. If you must post a photo, strip the EXIF metadata first. Tools like scrambled EXIF for Android or just a simple desktop script can wipe the GPS coordinates that your phone automatically embeds in every shot.
It feels like we're describing a full-time job just to be a private person. Is it even worth it? Or are we heading toward a world where we all just have to accept that privacy is dead and we should all just live under our real names?
I refuse to accept that privacy is dead is an inevitability. It is just becoming a luxury of the diligent. But you raise a good point about the verified identity trend. We're seeing platforms like X and others push hard for blue check verification with government ID. They argue it stops bots and doxing, but it actually creates a honeypot. If a platform has your passport on file and they get breached, the doxers don't even have to do any work, they just download the database.
That's the ultimate backfire. Verify your identity to stay safe, and then the safe vault gets cracked. It reminds me of the People Connect situation you mentioned. These companies collect this info under the guise of transparency or safety, but they are essentially building the infrastructure for harassment.
That is why the data broker opt-out is my third big takeaway for Daniel. There is a whole industry of companies like Axiom, Epsilon, and White Pages that scrape public records and sell your home address for pennies. You can spend a weekend manually submitting opt-out requests. There's a great resource called the Data Broker Registry that lists them all. Or you can use automated tools like DeleteMe or Optory. They act like a digital janitor, constantly scanning these sites and filing cease and desist or remove requests on your behalf.
I've used one of those, and it's wild to see the report afterward. We found you on 142 sites and removed you from 120. You don't realize how much of your life is just sitting there in a searchable format for any weirdo with a credit card.
It's the low-hanging fruit of doxing. If you remove yourself from the major brokers, you forced a doxer to actually work for it. Most bullies are lazy. If they can't find your address in 5 minutes on White Pages, they'll often move on to an easier target. It's about raising the cost of attack.
We've talked about the technical side, but I want to go back to the human element. You mentioned swatting earlier. That's where doxing turns into potential state-sanctioned violence. When you look at the 2025 streamer cases, what was the pivot point where it went from a digital annoyance to a tactical team at the door?
It usually starts with a VoIP exploit. A doxer finds your real name and address through the methods we discussed. Then they use a voice over IP service to spoof your phone number or call a non-emergency police line. They spin a story usually involving a hostage or a violent crime to trigger a high-priority response. The reason it works is that dispatchers are trained to take these calls seriously. The defense here isn't just technical, it's social. Many high-profile streamers now pre-register with their local police departments. They basically say, hey, I'm a public figure, I'm at risk of swatting. If you get a call about my address, please call me or check my secondary security protocols before sending the SWAT team.
It's wild that we live in a world where you have to call the cops to tell them, don't raid me if someone calls. It's like a no-fly list, but for your own living room. But let's look at the future implication, part of Daniel's prompt. As AI gets better at unmasking, will we see a counter-tech? You mentioned zero-knowledge proofs in our prep notes. What is that, and could it save us?
This is where it gets really cool, and it's something I think will be the standard by 2030. A zero-knowledge proof, or ZKP, is a cryptographic method where you can prove something is true without revealing the information itself. Imagine you want to join an over-18 forum. Instead of uploading your ID, which a doxer could steal, your digital wallet provides a ZKP that says, I have verified this person is over 18, without ever sharing your birth date, name, or address. You get the access, but the platform and therefore the doxers get zero data.
So I can prove I'm a local resident, or a verified human, or a licensed doctor, without giving the site a single piece of doxable info. That feels like the holy grail of online interaction. But we're a few years away from that being mainstream, right?
We are, but the foundations are being built now on various blockchain protocols and self-sovereign identity frameworks. Until then, we are in the Wild West phase. The offensive tools, the AI scrapers and stylometry engines are currently faster and cheaper than the defensive ones. That's why Daniel's prompt is so timely. We're in a period where common sense isn't enough anymore. You need active counterintelligence if you want to stay truly anonymous.
Active counterintelligence sounds very Jason Bourne for someone who just wants to talk about video games on Reddit. But I see your point. If the bullies have super forensics, you need super obscurity. One thing that struck me in the research Daniel sent over was the phishing aspect. People think doxing is always about finding info, but a lot of it is tricking you into giving it up.
That is the social engineering loop. A doxer might send you a DM pretending to be Reddit support or a brand offering a sponsorship. They send you a link to a portal that looks legitimate. You log in, and boom, they have your IP address, your browser fingerprint, and maybe even your real name from the OAuth login. The simplest rule in the book still applies. Never click a link in a DM, especially if it's from someone you don't know, IRL. Use a link expander or a sandbox to see where it's actually going.
It always comes back to the basics, doesn't it? Don't click the link, don't use the same password, don't trust the helpful stranger. But Herman, let's talk about the vigilante aspect. We've seen cases where the internet mob doxes someone they think committed a crime, only to find out they got the wrong person. The 2013 Boston Marathon bombing is the classic example, but it's happened hundreds of times since then.
That is the dark side of crowdsourcing. When you have thousands of people trying to solve a crime using OSINT, you get confirmational bias. Someone finds a guy who looks vaguely similar and has a suspicious Facebook post, and within an hour, his life is ruined. With AI, this gets even more dangerous because an AI can generate evidence or correlations that look statistically significant but are actually hallucinations or coincidences. If an AI tells a mob, there is a 98% match between this anonymous troll and this random high school teacher, that mob isn't going to wait for the other 2%.
It's automated injustice. We're giving the mob a scientific excuse for their pitchforks. It really highlights why the intent part of the law is so difficult. If the mob genuinely believes they are helping, is it still doxing? Legally, the answer is usually yes, but in the court of public opinion, it's a mess.
And that's why the radical transparency we talked about is so risky. If you have nothing to hide, you still have everything to fear from someone who is convinced you're a villain. Accuracy doesn't matter in a doxing attack, only the volume of the harassment matters. If 10,000 people think you're a monster because of a connected dot that was actually a mistake, your life is still ruined.
So, to recap the Herman Poppleberry guide to not getting ruined, use different browsers for different lies, mask your emails, launder your writing style through a professional tone, AI, opt out of data brokers, and for the love of all that is holy, don't post pictures of your window or your birds.
It sounds like a lot, but once you set up the systems, the email masks, and the dedicated browsers, it adds maybe 10 seconds to your day. 10 seconds to avoid a lifetime of headaches. And keep an eye on the legal side. As more states follow California's lead, we might actually see some doxing kingpins go to jail, which is the only real deterrent.
I hope you're right. It feels like we're in an arms race where the shields are finally starting to catch up to the swords, but the swords are now powered by LLMs. It's a wild time to be a private person on the public internet.
It really is. And I think Daniel hit on the most important part, common sense infosec. It's not about being a hacker, it's about being a difficult target. Like we always say, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the guy next to you who's still using password 123 and posting his Starbucks cup with his full name on it.
Well, I'm definitely gonna go check my bird chirps and skyline reflections now. This has been a fascinating and slightly terrifying look at the state of digital privacy in 2026. Thanks for the deep dive, Herman. You really went full donkey on a mission with those technical details.
I take that as a compliment. It's an important topic, and I'm glad Daniel prompted it. There's so much noise out there, and getting into the actual OSINT loop mechanisms is the only way to understand how to break that loop.
And that's a wrap for today's exploration of doxing and the AI-powered future of anonymity. Big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a huge thank you to Modal for sponsoring the show. They provide the serverless GPU credits that power our research and the generation of these scripts. If you're a developer working with AI, definitely check out Modal for your infrastructure needs.
This has been my weird prompts. If you found this episode helpful, or if it just scared you into changing your passwords, we'd love it if you could leave us a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the best way to help other people find the show and stay informed.
We'll be back soon with more of Daniel's weird and wonderful prompts. Until then, keep your data tight and your writing fingerprint neutral.
See ya.
Goodbye.
This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We shake.